this is a very important topic we are about. We're talking about education, and our panel is a very international panel. We have someone from the UK, US, someone from Germany, Serbs, it's Germany, I can say. Ellen from US, Menno from Holland, Netherlands, and Benjamin from Israel. Let's jump right into it. Cindy, why is this panel needed?
Well, I have to say, first of all, this panel is massively needed because this room was jam-packed full for the previous panel that was all about money. Now we're talking about education, and we love all of you sitting in here, but I'm horrified by the amount of people who left and are not coming back. So this panel is massively needed to demonstrate why the topic of education should be as important to Russia and the rest of the world as is the topic of money. So I'm entirely biased. I'm an entrepreneur. I have 2 early-stage startups, both of which are designed around things that I happen to feel very strongly about with regard to the education of tomorrow. My first startup is designed to help everyone reinvent the future of business. I'm a naturally very action-oriented person, and that led me to observe that the single biggest pool of untapped natural resource in this world is human good intentions that never translate into action. Plus, I have a background in advertising, which led me to observe there's another, equally large, powerful and untapped pool of resource, which is corporate good intentions. Because companies have good intentions too, but just like people, they find it really hard to find quick, easy and simple ways to act on them, but importantly, in a corporate context, in ways that make sense for and actively help drive their business. So, my startup, If We Ran the World, is designed to bring together human good intentions and corporate good intentions and activate them collectively, one micro-action at a time. If Facebook is the social graph and Twitter is the interest graph, I designed If We Ran the World to be the action graph. But I'm trying to do something much more difficult than Facebook and Twitter, which is get people to do shit in the real world. It's going to take a whole lot longer. And If We Ran the World ultimately delivers a benefit that I call action branding. You self-identify and self-express as you are what you do. You are the sum of your actions. It delivers personal action branding for individuals and corporate action branding for brands and businesses. Because it works for brands in the same way. You build your profile not through PR, spin, greenwashing, but through action. So, If We Ran the World is ultimately designed to help companies find a way to do good and make money simultaneously. And not in the old world order way most companies currently do it, which goes, we make money here, and then we do good by writing checks to causes to clear our conscience over here, but about making money because you do good. Finding a way to integrate social responsibility into the way you do business on a day-to-day basis that then makes it a key driver of future growth and profitability. So I designed If We Ran the World as the marketing and business platform of the future. Most brands, no matter how future forward, have only gotten as far as the level that I call co-creation. They invite consumers to create content and to share it. I am all about the level beyond that, which is co-action. Brands and consumers micro-acting together to create impacts in the real world that benefit consumers, benefit society, and benefit the brand and its business. The business model for If We Ran the World, which is also the business model I want to inculcate in the business of the future, is shared values plus shared action equals profit. No business school is teaching this at the moment. In fact, although If We Ran the World is only 2 years old, very early stage in beta, last year Harvard Business School wrote us up and taught us as a case study because they found our business model so unique and innovative. So I believe the education of tomorrow is absolutely about teaching young people today to redesign business to create the world we'd all like to live and work in. My other startup is about education in a different context. I date younger men. They tend to be men in their 20s. And through dating younger men, I encountered very directly and personally the real implications of the creeping ubiquity of hardcore pornography in our culture. We live in a world today where porn is freely and massively available online, where kids are therefore accessing it at incredibly early ages, in a society where we all have sex and nobody ever talks about it. Parents are too embarrassed to teach children about sex. Schools and colleges run into issues if they try and make up the sex education gap. And so hardcore porn has become by default the sex education of today. And that is not a good thing. So when I realized this 3 years ago, I put up on no money, so it's very basic, very clunky, very minimal, a website at makelovenotporn.com, which posts the myths of hardcore porn and balances them with the reality. The construct is porn world, real world. This is what happens in the porn world, this is what happens in the real world. And by the way, very importantly, Make Love Not Porn is not anti-porn. The issue I'm tackling is not porn. The issue I am tackling is the complete lack in our society of an open, healthy dialogue around sex and porn, which would then allow people to bring a real-world mindset to the viewing of what is essentially artificial entertainment. If you boiled my entire message of Make Love Not Porn down to one thing, it'd be purely and simply talk about it. I had the opportunity to launch Make Love Not Porn at TED. I took a deliberate decision to be extremely explicit in my TED talk. As a result, everybody who was at TED 2009 remembers my talk. As one Twitterer said, it was the first time the words "come on my face" have been heard on the TED stage 6 times in succession. You can Google me, you'll find it. As a result, the response to Make Love Not Porn has been extraordinary. And people have reached out. Young people write to me from all over the world. Young people write to me from Russia, thanking me for what is a very basic, very clunky website. So I feel a huge responsibility to take Make Love Not Porn forwards in a way that will make it much more far-reaching, helpful and effective. I'm turning it into a business venture. I've conceived it as potentially a massively scalable business, because if I want to counter the impact of porn as default sex education, I have to come up with something that has the potential to be as mass, as mainstream, and as all-pervasive in our society as porn is today. My team and I are building what we will launch at the end of next month as MakeLoveNotPorn.tv. And what I am doing is taking every dynamic that exists out there in social media currently and applying them to the one area that no social media network or platform has ever gone or will ever dare go, which is sex. I want to socialize real-world sex. I want to make it socially acceptable and therefore socially shareable in a way that, to be frank, nobody else has ever achieved. And I cannot even begin to tell you how extraordinarily difficult this is. We're at a conference where everyone is talking about the impact of technology on human behavior. I am tackling with Make Love Not Porn the single biggest impact technology is currently having on the most fundamental aspect of human behavior, which is our sexuality, which informs everything about how we feel about ourselves, other people, our relationships, our lives, our happiness. Nobody else has really faced up to this. Nobody else is doing anything about it. I had enormous trouble getting funded. I'm having enormous trouble actually putting a payments infrastructure in place for a site that is deemed to be adult content. And I am creating something that has the potential to benefit all of you, your daughters, your sons, the children you have not yet had, all of whom need what is fundamentally education that in today's wild world is needed in a way it never was previously. And I have to say, the one thing that's keeping me going is relying on what Steve Jobs said in his Apple ad. The people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. That's why I'm all about the education of tomorrow.
Cindy, thank you so much. I think you can change the world. Thank you. Very inspirational. I hope you learned a lot of Cindy's talk. Nick, please, what is your subject on education? And how do you react on Cindy's talk?
Well, the first reaction is, after Cindy talked, the room became much more full, so I guess she did something very right. That's very nice. But there was probably another reason, that because you said in the previous session the room was so full because they were talking about money. We are talking here about education, and maybe people don't know, or at least the venture capitalists haven't realized it yet, but education is the second largest industry in the world after healthcare. And only in the tutoring part today it is a business of more than $100 billion a year, out of which half is spent for math tutoring. And this number is supposed to go further and go up to 150 billion in only 3 years till 2015. So having that in mind, I'm going to show you a product that we have developed out of Germany, but it is to be used internationally, of a concept helping students to learn math online. I guess if I would ask you, who of you in his career when he was younger, still at school or as a student, was either receiving or giving help in math to someone or from someone? That's exactly the point. Math is one of the core sciences, and we heard in many presentations today that we need more engineers, that is particularly in our industry, both in media and online, one of the key assets. And for each of them you need math, and math is one of the core parts. Now, some of us were lucky and got very good education. We had the opportunity to be taught in the right way and had also maybe the right incentives to do so. But many people out of the world, not only they don't have incentives, they don't have a chance to learn math. And what BetaMarks does is it helps in a very efficient and cost-attractive way to give access to top-notch math learning to any child in this world, as long as he has access to the internet. Now, I will show you a small video that basically represents a bit what BetaMarks does, but I would give you just 3 things that are most relevant in this piece. So one part is it has huge content that a teacher possibly would never be able to follow in his normal classroom. The second thing is it's adaptive, means it doesn't matter at what level you enter the subject of math or how big or good your background is. You can start from any point and from there pick up to get to the level you want to get. And the third part is that it is intelligence. It means it understands what you're doing. Even if it's a machine, it behaves like a teacher who would be sitting just behind you, helping you to solve the problem, splitting it in steps and telling you where in which part of the steps you were right or wrong, giving you the solution, giving you maybe a fuller presentation, a video, and then following on that the next exercise that just fits to the previous one. So let's have a look at the video and then I'll say a few more words.
BetaMarks helps you to learn maths online, wherever and whenever you want. BetaMarks helps to improve your mathematical skills, regardless of what school or class you attend. BetaMarks takes into account what you already know and suggests what should be practiced or repeated. Based on this knowledge, BetaMarks will guide you through each calculation step by step. Should you run into difficulties with the exercises, the program will automatically offer assistance. BetaMarks displays solutions and alternative examples, in addition to clarifying how to progress in the most effective way. Whatever topic you're studying in class, BetaMarks will find appropriate exercises and explanations according to your personal needs. This process provides the best possible chance of success in your next exam. You set your own goals. Choose whether you want to reach a top mark, or if you're happy to aim for an average. Try it. You'll notice how simple maths can be, and you'll be surprised how much fun you can have with maths, even if the topics are hard.
Okay, this was just a brief look into it, but I'm encouraging any one of you to go to the site and try it out yourself. It's fun. It helps you to remember some things you might have missed when you were younger. And if you have kids, it definitely helps these kids and you as a parent to get over the next hurdle or the next exam that is in front of you. Now, let me give you a few more insights on BetaMarks itself. We are a German-based company that is half made out of teachers and professionals in education, people who develop didactical concepts, and the other half is IT people who then implement it and create all these nice editors and solutions that it can be graphically designed. And as we started in Germany, we realized that teaching math is not as simple, because in order to get into schools, which is our core target, you need to really convince many, many people. You need to convince the teachers, but you need to convince the director. You need eventually to convince somebody who's going to pay for it, whether the parents, or maybe if it's a private school, the manager of the school, or if it's a government, who we also speak to, maybe a whole government, as it is happening now in Latin America, where they decide to buy a product like this for all the kids in the country. That can happen as well. So with this perspective in mind, we are trying to make it really easy and accessible to any kid in this world to get the best teaching, and at the end learn math in a way that they wouldn't be able to afford nor have the possibility to access at any other solution that we have known so far. Two more examples of applications where we've seen. When we first started to introduce this product in India, we invited some teachers to train them so that these teachers could introduce this concept at their schools. And interestingly, we had the teachers test this application themselves. And once they did it, the teachers realized, said, hey, this is a completely new way of looking at this. There are some things I didn't know myself. And the people who were in charge of the program that we were implementing in India suddenly came to the idea saying, hey, we could use this to increase the proficiency level of our teachers in the whole country, which we know even in our, let's say, much more civilized and developed worlds is not easy either, but in the developing countries, the gap between the best teacher and the worst teacher is huge. So kids even going to school sometimes don't get enough education. This system, or systems like this, enable to level this out and give even the teachers the possibility to catch up, to get to the level. And I always like to compare it like a plane with a navigation system. In every plane, definitely, there is a pilot. But still, the pilot, he likes to give over the control to the navigation system so that that actually carries the plane, and only in the case something happens unexpected, then the pilot jumps in. That's what we want to do to be for the education system in the schools of the future. Thank you. Bravo.
Bravo, Nikolas. I wish I would have known better marks when I was in school, many years ago, many, many years ago. Recently, no, a year ago I was in New York. I always meet a friend, Kevin Slavin, maybe you heard from him, and an old DLD friend, and I asked him, Kevin, what's the latest thing? What is changing our future? And without hesitating, he said, you have to see GenSpace. GenSpace, it's close to the next big thing, or it's already the next big thing. Ellen, I'm very happy that you made it to Moscow. I'm proud of it. I'm proud of the whole panel, because I really think Cindy, Nikolas, Ellen, Menno, you, Benjamin, you make a difference. But what is why it's you make a difference?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say I also don't think those VCs should have left the room, because education leads to innovation, which leads to business. They should still be here.
Absolutely. Cindy's part.
So, 50 years ago, if you told someone that everyone was going to have a computer on their desk and they were going to use it every day, they would have laughed at you.
A little bit loud.
So, I would say that maybe 50 years from today, everyone is going to be doing genetic engineering at home. We've gone from coding machines to coding life. Coding life started in the 1970s. It's produced a lot of products, but it was always the purview of companies or universities. Now, the technology curve has suddenly taken an upward turn. The accessibility of this technology is unprecedented. It's become cheaper, it's become easier, it's become more accessible, and it's touching every facet of our daily lives, whether we know it or not. It's in our medicine, it's in our food. It will solve energy problems. It'll do a lot of different things. It even will affect our personal lives, and that people may be looking at the personal genomics profiles of the people that they're dating sometime in the future. So I think that the world should be prepared for this onslaught of this technology in a way that is meaningful, and in my world, hands-on.
A little bit more to you. So.
In my world, hands-on, much better. In my world, hands-on is meaningful, and that's the most meaningful type of learning. And in 2009, I was fortunate enough to co-found GenSpace, which is the world's first community biotechnology lab. It's a place where you can come and you can learn about biotech. You can do it hands-on. You can do it together with your teenage daughter. We encourage innovation at all levels, either professional scientists seeking to innovate something in their spare time, or an amateur coming just to do something that maybe has been done 1,000 times before, but it's new to them. All we care is that what you do is a safe project. So it's kind of this free-floating space where you don't have to justify what you're doing as being profitable or even that it's going to work. And this is where we feel that real innovation is going to happen, particularly since we're bringing in people from all backgrounds. The people that are coming to us are mostly not from the science field. And they're getting their hands wet with this technology, and they're doing some really, or trying to do some very amazing things. And I have a very short film, if Julian will play it.
Julian, go ahead.
Okay. Think of it as coding life instead of coding a computer, and that's going to be accessible to everyone in this room in a relatively short period of time. We've already gone from the $3 billion 10-year genome sequencing to perhaps next year $1,000 will sequence your entire genome, and it'll be on something about the size of a flash drive is the machine that's going to do it. That's where we're headed.
Imagine what you just heard. Say it again, because it's so important.
I said that we've gone from 10 years and $3 billion for the first human genome to $1,000 and a machine the size of a flash drive. Those are the latest whole genome sequencers out there.
$1,000 genome sequences. What this...
So reading and writing DNA code is now cheaper and more accessible than ever. And I really think that unless we really strive to understand this technology, we're not going to be in a position to make the decisions that are coming down the pipe for various things.
And this is a matter of education. You have to teach this, I think. Good. Where's the film?
I don't know.
Where's the film? Julian, where's the film? Oh,
this is a video Nature
Want to be a molecular biologist? Well, you can be at the world's first community laboratory.
Works a lot like a gym. The idea is that you come whenever you'd like, and you pay dues like you would in a gym.
Using mostly donated equipment and found materials, a small group of biology enthusiasts recently created this lab at a warehouse in Brooklyn, New York.
We built a lab right on this big open space. It's a big glass cube. All the materials that we've made it out of are found materials, so glass doors, windows that were salvaged and repurposed.
22.4 micrometers.
But why would people want to run lab experiments in their spare time?
It is attractive to people who have ideas that aren't necessarily useful, but they're certainly fun.
One of the first projects being developed by the GenSpace team is a device that will be launched by helium balloons 30 kilometers into the Earth's stratosphere in search of remote signs of life.
The High Altitude Microbial Sampling Station, or HAMS for short, is a weather balloon that's going to be lofted up to about 100,000 feet into the stratosphere, capture microbes, hopefully, bring them down in a sterile package, in a sealed package, and then have them analyzed.
So far, the Garage biotechnologists have just built a prototype of their microbe catcher, but they hope to launch the real deal later this year. GenSpace is much more than just a laboratory for do-it-yourselfers. It also provides hands-on educational courses for people to come and learn.
It's not just scientists who are working in the lab. It's people who are bringing their own curiosity about the world and bringing it to our lab and exploring.
The GenSpace founders see themselves on the vanguard of a new movement of DIY biology.
So GenSpace is the first community biolab, but it certainly won't be the last. I get the sense that there'll be a lot more labs popping up all over the country and all over the world.
And they think labs like GenSpace could revolutionize the study of biology.
Now that we've reached a certain level of knowledge in the information age, we've come to, it's open space for another age, and I think that age will be the biological age. And I think, the next great PC computer or Apple computer won't be a computer at all. It'll be this amazing bacteria that has this amazing application that everyone's going to want to have. I don't know what it is yet. If I knew, I wouldn't be talking to you here.
For Nature Medicine, I'm Ailey Dolgan.
So just briefly, you might say, well, what would I do with biotech in my personal life? For example, I had an infestation of ladybugs in my house, and I heard that they might be not really good ladybugs that eat the bad bugs, but they might be this invasive species from Japan. So I crushed one up, I extracted the DNA, I sent it out for sequencing. I know what it is now. Maybe you want to know if the non-GMO food you're eating is really non-GMO. You can do that. You can do that at home. You can extract the DNA, you can test it and find out. Maybe you want to test yourself. You can do a genetic test on yourself. There are a lot of diseases like hemochromatosis that you can do a simple test at home on yourself and find out. So this technology really has a lot of uses, and we're doing a lot of interesting things. For instance, we're developing a biosensor that's a yeast that will turn color when it's exposed to water that has estrogen pollution in it. And a local group that we're working with is going to map the Gowanus Canal in Brooklyn using citizen scientists who are taking samples of this yeast and putting it in the water. And you can tell the color just by looking at a paint chip chart and comparing it, and you can get an idea of the intensity of the pollution. So this is coming. And we hope that community labs will be a resource for everyone, and we are the first, but we're not the last. There are many starting in countries all over the world now.
Thank you, Ellen. This is coming. It's already here, thanks to you. It's great. Menno, what are you doing here? What is your kind of education you want to bring to us?
First, wanted to tell you a little story triggered by your story, Alan. I was in the US and I came across a company called 23andMe. 23andMe.org.
23 chromosomes.
I would recommend it to all of you. You pay a few $100s, so it's quite expensive. And then you spit in a little box, and then they analyze your DNA, and you get a whole profile back. There's part of it which was kind of scary. They give you statistics on probability of every disease under the sun. You maybe don't want to know that. The other thing is they describe your physique, which is a bit of an not insightful until you realize that they've never seen you, and they're quite accurate. But the thing that was the genuine gift, at least for me, was they give you two pictures. One related to your father and the other one related to your mother. And they show where your father and your mother come from 30,000 years back. So I live in this small country, the Netherlands. My father is a tall Frisian. And the little map showed all the way back to the Vikings in southern Norway. My mother was actually quite good looking when she was young. She actually featured on an ad for chocolate. And she comes back from Iraq. And this is a whole gypsy trade through Eastern Europe and then southern France into the Netherlands. And those two things, like if you think about gifts through genomics, those two, at least for me, were true gifts. What brought me here is basically, first of all, a complete dissatisfaction with education as I experienced it. And I was lucky enough to always have had like great education. But it started at primary school. I was a really good pupil, So the headmaster, when I was 10, said, you've done your exercises, you are now freed from classroom to do the gardening. So I spent 2 years gardening. I had a great 2 years as an 11-year-old, attending to the school garden. But I didn't learn anything, but it was the biggest prize you could get. Then I would go to, I did a big, good score, so I went to, which is called here in Northern Europe, Northwestern Europe, gymnasium. So 40% of the time was spent on ancient Greek and Latin. It was very interesting. I never ever used anything of it. Then I started studying. I went to study physics. I majored in biophysics, focused on photosynthesis, and left with at least one clear idea in my mind to never ever work in that field again. I wanted to work at Philips, where my father comes from. He was always in product development and design. He is one of the IP holders of the CD player. Philips turned me down, and I had as a backup McKinsey. So I started working at McKinsey. And it's actually still interesting to me that McKinsey was never interested in what I graduated in. It didn't care. They didn't care at all. So I started working at McKinsey. I worked there for 22 years. I worked around the world. And then went to Singularity University. It was the earliest presentation here on it. And it dawned me that I should do one big thing here and build a school that I would like to attend. So I did. It's called Think. And I want to very quickly present to you what Think is all about, okay? So it's an international school. It's in Amsterdam. You can see it in small print, Amsterdam School of Creative Leadership. It's an international school, which means it's a truly global mix. Not a single nationality is double-digit in terms of its share of students. It's truly diverse and, in terms of triggering a creative clash. My participants do really fight and disagree on virtually everything. It's postgraduate. You need 8 years of work, and it depends a bit on where you come from in the world, whether that means you're 25 or 40. And it's on invitation, so it's no open enrollment. I search the world, got a huge network, I select my participants, and I ask them in, and try to create a tribe out of them. It was originally meant to be for the creative sector, but that changed over time, and it became a mix, a third, a third, a third. A third of people who lead NGOs, a third of people who are serial entrepreneurs, and a third of people who are innovation managers from corporate. And I found along the way that that's actually quite a cool mix, because it relates to the simple framework of what, why, how. The why, which is very much at the essence of what NGOs are about, understanding why you as an enterprise are contributing to the world. The what, which is what entrepreneurs really understand and what drives them forward. And the how, which is the professionalism of corporates. Now, give you a sense of the type of participants that I recruited for the first term, and they're currently in the school. So this ranges from, I'll just pick a couple of names, Ben Keane, who's been building local communities in remote rural areas in Fiji, Sierra Leone, and creates social networks around them which are global. Femke Bartels, a Dutch lady who's been building new businesses for Greenpeace International. Hans Vitters, a corporate guy from France, a French guy, who has been building LED lighting. Raoul Nadal, who's been founding the biggest volunteer organization in India. It goes on. Nishan Degnarain on the lower right side, who's been asked by the Prime Minister of Mauritius to develop a new plan to create a future for that country, which is literally sinking in the ocean. So it's a huge social, economical, and environmental problem. So that's sort of the group, and for me that's the biggest kick. To have such a group of people around in a school and work with them. Now, the program is as follows. It's 1.5 years, it's part-time, and it's truly applied and blended, which means that the other 80%, these people are all on a mission. They're doing something which is quite courageous, and the program is fully integrated with it. So the contact is daily, and the 20% is when they come to Amsterdam. But the other 80% is when they're on their own mission. It's about innovation and design thinking, but the specific area which interests them all is societal challenges. So this is not about designing the next series of teacups. It's really about working towards innovative solutions on topics that we all care about. There are no lectures. Lectures are forbidden. So I bring in global experts, typically the kind of folks that you could also get at a TED. Actually, quite some of them are from the same source. But they're not allowed to lecture. And that's a very explicit rule up front. And it actually excites them, and that's why I get them for free, and it scares the hell out of them. Because they come in, and my participants are well prepared. We sit in a very dense little amphitheater, like half this size. It's fully packed. It's heated like a TV studio. And they sit on a little stage, and then one after the other, groups of 4 come on stage and interrogate them. And the only rescue you have is to be authentic and show your vulnerabilities. And it's very, very worthwhile. There are also games, we run in projects, there's constant feedback, and there's team approaches. We do R&D, but the R&D is mostly outside of functional depth, but trying to look for rich analogies from biology, from biotech, from medicine, from history, from arts, from culture. We have some leadership frameworks, but the real interesting thing, and this is what gets the highest feedback, is the people getting, for the first time typically in their life, structured feedback. Time to reflect on their own leadership gaps and spikes and personal coaching. And the coaching continues for the full 1.5 years. We do startup incubation, but actually I try to stay away from it and looking more for participants who already have like 5 or 10 years of successful growth and want to accelerate and have an oomph in the whole world. So this is very large scale. We do have top-notch faculty, but it's not academic and it's not accredited. And I've got this banner inside, proud to not be accredited, which really keeps it at a distance of all the formal education and the big universities. And because it's an independent foundation, we can get away with this kind of statements. And finally, it's about mind and body. So try to create meaningful experiences. And I'd like to finish here with so check www.think.org. This is the introduction weekend. So I wanted in the introduction weekend to bring us into nature and create a little tribe. The problem in the Netherlands is there is no nature left. The last natural forest in the Netherlands was cut in 1905. So that's more than 100 years ago. But the one thing we have, which is World Heritage, is the so-called Waddenzee, which is very shallow water, and you can walk to islands. And this is the first group. They came straight from the plane, 70% seriously jet-lagged. This was 6 o'clock in the morning on the Saturday. We traveled them to the Dijk, where they were put into wetsuits, and then they jumped off the Dijk and started walking to the nearest island, which is a four-hour walk. And at the other side, there was a genuine sense of accomplishment and of one team. And this is a blog from Ben Keane, who I introduced earlier, talking about our guides, the white-bearded frogmen. And it all felt kind of Lord of Ringish, but it did indeed what it needed. It created immediately one group, one community globally, that then started working on the program. Thanks.
Thank you, Menno. Whom from you would like to attend this school? Too bad I'm not 40 anymore. So, this is a very diverse panel in terms of education. I'm happy to introduce you now to Benjamin. Benjamin, what are you doing? You come from Israel, from famous Technion. So you have another aspect to the topic of education.
Yes, thank you. I will try. I actually feel that I'm in minority here because I'm representing the so-called established, more formal. No, but it's nice because what stands out in this panel is that you see how education was democratized, using the internet, and this is huge. But I think universities in general are missing out, not only because they, don't teach, there's no, of course, sex teaching, like Sydney points out. It's not in university, not in high school, not in elementary school. They are lacking not only in their math teaching, but most importantly, they are lacking in their entrepreneurship teaching. I think this is very clear. If you go back to the first university that started in Bologna in 1180-something, or maybe it was Padua, the role was to do teaching. And teaching is done today very much like it was done there. You have a teacher giving a generic presentation to 35, 100, 500 students, giving the same stuff, repeating it. Then following the Industrial Revolution, you had the research. What we are witnessing now is, of course, the tech transfer. And your university are finally realizing that if they will not be able to demonstrate their direct impact on the marketplace by creating companies, creating jobs, etc., they will become irrelevant. So this is, this is for us, it's a major issue. And the Technion, being the first university in Israel, we always refer to the Technion as, we say that it's the MIT of the Middle East, but actually we prefer to say that MIT is the Technion of the United States. We are very modest. So we put a lot of emphasis on entrepreneurship. Now, the Technion itself put a big dent on Israel's economy, and I will just give you an example. Many of you probably know that there are about 120, 130 Israeli or Israeli-related companies traded on NASDAQ. 70% of the CEOs or COOs of these companies are graduates of the Technion. But that's not enough. That's not enough today, and we are looking to do much greater. So, first of all, we are becoming much more entrepreneurial, and I will give you a few examples how is this done. So there's, of course, an entrepreneurship program at the Technion. You can actually engineer entrepreneurship, so to teach people how to become entrepreneurs, and I think this is a major challenge. Now, of course, there are many issues related to entrepreneurship, and first of all is the risk profile. If you go to, I don't know, I don't want to name any places, but if I have to, then maybe Japan, maybe to some extent Germany. I hope I don't offend any Germans. And you ask graduates, of a leading university, how would you like your career to be? They will tell you, I would like to go work for Siemens and retire at the age of 60. I know this is a vast generalization, but bear with me. If you go to Israel and you ask the same person and he gives you this answer, people will say, this guy is not taking his medications properly. Something is extremely wrong. So what I'm saying is that, it has to do with the risk profile. And how do you change a risk profile? Risk profile is not only entrepreneurship, you see it all over the world. So this is a major challenge for us to teach people to be more entrepreneurial and give them the tools. In addition to this, we offer, some direct tools. So we do directly investing in companies that we start out. I am responsible for the technology transfer of the Technion, and we file 100 inventions every year. So every 3 days, a patent is filed. We set up at least 10 new companies every year, and we give a similar number of licenses. Last year, we established a fund, a $10 million fund, in which we invest in our own startup. So all of a sudden, you see universities, which are public organizations, act as pure investors, which is, quite unusual. Because normally, when you think about universities, these are huge, organizations with very deep pockets, but very short hands. So what is changing now is that all of a sudden you see universities investing in their own startups, in the startups that evolve out of the universities, and this is quite unique. Another phenomenon that you see is that universities are, of course, becoming global. And the Technion is now opening a campus together with Cornell University in New York. And we have a collaboration with Singapore, so universities are, becoming global, talent is becoming global, and this is, this is the focus of what we are doing now.
Thank you so much, Benjamin. Cindy, you heard now these presentations. You are quite an activist, and you dare to say what you think. So what would you say on this, what you have heard right now? What inspires you?
Well, I guess, okay, to say, actually, all of you inspire me, but listening to this whole panel, I just think that we just have to blow up the entire education system globally and redesign it from scratch. Because, you know, what I see, and this isn't just the conversations on this panel, it's the conversations I have generally, I see the old world order educational system being an absolute stranglehold on our ability to invent the future. And actually Clay Shirky, the internet guru, put it very well. He said, institutions have a vested interest in perpetuating the problems to which they are the solution. And that is exactly what we see in the old world order academic institutions and in all of the places that actually don't allow young people the freedom, the entrepreneurial spirit, the ability to tackle things they would never think of themselves. And so listening to all of you, I just go, you know, we have to find a way to redesign what we mean by education. And we have to find a way to redesign the system, and that is enormously difficult. People are chipping away at it around the edges. All of you guys are, you know, in some form or another. But my question is always, when you face a task that monumental, where are the key pressure points? Where are the key nodes at which you can actually exert influence and do something that will have a disproportionately widespread effect? And I don't know the answer to that. Where do you start if you want to redesign the global education system from scratch?
Very simple said. I think Nikolas is at the very edge of mathematics becomes a difference. Do you think so?
Well, I can't say whether it's the edge to become a difference, but I think that the school system as such will definitely revolutionize in the next maybe 5 to 10 years, that we will be seeing much more activities like the ones I showed you with beta marks, and that is going to become standard. There is no government initiative that kind of created the prerequisites for a social network like Facebook to happen. Still it did. The same way education will find its way. And with the technology being at the fingertips of the developing worlds, I must say, from what I have seen, we in Central Europe have to take good care of ourselves if all these kids from Latin America and India get a €30 laptop at their disposition with a broadband access and programs like this, what cognitive power they will put out in the world, and we have to compete with that. So I guess this is all happening, and there won't be help from governments to do that. They will maybe use it as a political campaign in one or the other country because it will be appropriate. But it's the solution and the value that we are providing which will kind of create at the end the breakthrough.
Thank you, Nick. Ellen, you spoke about citizen scientists. Can you imagine citizen educationists?
Well, what you just said, both of you, it all feeds into this DIY culture. The DIY culture is very strong right now, and that includes education. So something like what you're doing, or what Udacity, if you've heard of them, is doing, where people, basically, it's DIY education. They educate themselves. They go out of their way to find it online or wherever they can, or in a citizen science lab. And they make their own curriculum, they make their own choices, and they educate themselves. And more of these resources are going to come online. And so I think the change is coming from the ground up. It's coming from the grassroots. It's coming from the point where you go into a classroom now, nobody's there. Everybody just cuts the class, goes to the lesson online now. That's the trend in universities. There's very little face-to-face anymore. So people are going to start picking and choosing.
Actually, if I can just respond to that briefly, the one thing you have to do to really enable the bottom-up model is you have to change parents' mindsets. Because actually the single biggest emotional dynamic that keeps the educational system going is the centuries of social cultural conditioning where your parent, and I'm sure everyone in this room empathizes that my parents were massively academic pressuring, the reassurance of you get a good degree, you get a good job, it sets you up for life. You know, how do you explode that?
Well, yeah, that's tough, and especially in science, where basically the PhD is your key to being taken seriously. And I'm running into that now with a couple of young entrepreneurs at GenSpace. And I still find myself saying, you really ought to get a PhD. So, but maybe there'll be an alternative to that where they can actually earn it through some internet university and do their work at GenSpace in a community lab. Who knows?
Menno, what do you think? How do you find the pupils of your school? These change makers, how do you find them?
And can I also respond quickly?
Sure.
To what Cindy was saying? I was quite struck by a piece of research that the firm I used to work with was involved with, which was under the leadership of a guy called Michael Barber, who did all the school reform in the UK. And they spent about a year looking around the world about what works in education and what doesn't. The first shocker was that a majority of school systems just don't work. And it was a sort of saddening picture. And, but there were also some things, some pointers that I think maybe provide a little bit of a direction to your question about if you want to change the whole world, where do you start? The first one was that the most critical age for, to affect people for the positive is that age group from 10 to 12. Before that, they're too young, and after that, they're set in their ways. So if you want to focus on reform, focus on that group. That was what came from that research. I know it's controversial and there are other kinds of researches, but anyway, I found the evidence somewhat compelling. The other one was that the countries that commit to that group commit so by putting their best and their brightest into the job of being a tutor, a teacher, a mentor for that age group. And so in my country, you can be a primary school teacher without even a degree. Yeah, in a country like Finland or Korea, you not only need to have a university degree, you need to be top of class. And so it's the idea of, it's the investment in the future, so let's put our best talent on it. I know it's clearly a low-tech solution, and I would agree with all the speakers that technology has a lot to bring and to facilitate and to connect, provide access. But I thought it's also worthwhile to talk about the talent game here.
And peer-to-peer teaching is amazing. When you get someone in a class who then turns to the next person next to them and starts showing them how to use a pipetter or something.
But also on the teachers, I run a big survey in my country every other year, which hundreds of thousands of people fill in. And one of the questions I once asked was, who was your most important mentor in your life? So who changed your path? Who put you on the right trajectory? Who saved you from going into crime or a dual job or whatever? And my favorite teacher consistently scored #1, more even than my parents or whoever. And so there is that, apparently still, like most people, somewhere along the way of 12, 18 years of education, get that touch.
That is absolutely what technology cannot replace, the human interface. Better teachers, people influence people.
Particularly when they're very high quality. Yeah.
This is the human interface. This is why we do DLD. You know, we don't want to meet virtual, we want to meet in real. So, Benjamin, your last words.
Well, I think what we all agree here that there's, you know, that there's obviously a paradigm shift, as people say. You know, when I grew up in Israel, you know, 30 years ago, the doctrine was go to a good school, as was pointed out, you know, study, buy a house, and find you know, a steady job. All these is gone. Basically, you know, I cannot tell my kids now, I mean, is buying a house a good investment? I'm not sure. You know, the only thing that is left is probably get good education, because, you know, that sustains. But everything else is now broken, and we have to reinvent itself. And, you know, I hope the universities will be able to do, you know, to live up to this challenge, because it's a huge challenge.
Thank you so much. The next panel is, what is good education? But we heard some of it, we heard now, and thank you for listening. And the conversation starts. Please. So, conversation
Thank
after
you.
the session starts.